improved so much. I played her at the beginning of the year, so I know what I'm up against, and I will just try to do my best again, and I know it's going to be a tough match. I have so much respect for her game. I'm doing a lot of good things. She was just playing much better than me, and I was just waiting for a window where maybe I can get a little bit more aggressive and I can get a point here and there, and got her in trouble. And yeah, I was a bit lucky, a bit played good in a good moment.
Did you hear that? Play it back. Play it back one more time. Because what you just heard was not a fan talking. That was not a commentator. That was not a Filipino journalist searching for a positive spin. That was the woman who, 48 hours from now, is going to walk onto the same court as Alexandra Eala, stare her down across the net, and try with everything she has to end this Miami dream all over again. That was her opponent, praising her, without being asked, without hesitation, without a single qualifier or caveat or diplomatic dodge. Let that sink in. Because this is not just a press conference moment. This is the entire tennis world telling you, in real time, through the words of the very players standing between Eala and the round of 16, that what is happening at Miami Open 2026 is beyond anything this tournament has ever seen before.
Been such a phenomenon to see the support you've gotten all over the world. Is there any place that surprised you that you were like, wow, I didn't know there were so many Filipinos here?
No, because we are kind of everywhere. Yeah, we are everywhere, I have noticed.
We are going to break down every word, every layer, everything it means for Saturday's match, for Eala's ranking, for the tournament, and for the 115 million Filipinos who haven't slept properly since Thursday morning. Sit down. You need to hear all of this. Let's start with Thursday, because before Linette said a single word about Eala, before that interview, before that quote, before any of it, Alex Eala did something on Hard Rock Stadium's court that should have been the headline of every sports publication on the planet. She played the longest match of her entire WTA career, 3 hours and 20 minutes, against 38-year-old German veteran Laura Siegemund, ranked 53rd in the world, a player who has been a professional for 2 full decades and who knows every single trick in the book. And this was not a smooth, dominant 3-set cruise. This was a war. A nasty, bad-tempered, physically punishing war.
I had to be patient. I'm sorry, the match was so long, I lost my voice. I think patience was key, and waiting for the right moment, you know. Yeah, patience, a lot of patience.
Both players complained to the umpire in a tetchy affair. When Eala was serving at 2-1 in the second set, Siegemund went walkabout after the Filipina player messed up her ball toss. Eala protested against Siegemund delaying between points. Mind games. Against a player who has been running them since before Alex Eala was old enough to hold a racket. And Eala, 20 years old, defending 390 points in the most high-pressure tournament of her year, didn't fold, didn't crumble, didn't let the gamesmanship get inside her head. Eala had led 3-0, 5-4, and 6-5 in the opening set. She blew 4 set points. Then she blew the tiebreak. The first set? Gone. More than an hour and 20 minutes of tennis, and she had nothing to show for it. In a different player, that is the moment the head drops. That is the moment the shoulders cave in and the crowd starts to go quiet and the opponent smells blood. But Eala came back out. And she broke Siegemund's serve early in both the second and third sets. Clinical, efficient, ruthless. The match that looked like it might spiral into a disaster became a statement. It was the 5th longest tour-level match of the entire 2026 season. And she walked off the court, looked straight at the camera, and wrote 2 words on the lens. Deja vu. She then said in her on-court interview, "It definitely was close. Very demanding physically and mentally, but that was one of my goals last year after this tournament, to improve physically. And here I am, fresh as a flower. Fresh as a flower."
Was close.
it definitely was close, very demanding physically and mentally, but that was one of my goals last year after this tournament, was to improve physically, and here I am, fresh as a flower, so yeah.
Alex, last question, ranked 140 in the world.
After 3 hours and 20 minutes against a 2-decade veteran who was trying to psychologically destabilize her throughout. Fresh as a flower. And the haters, who had been polishing their "Eala is too fragile for a long haul" takes since Indian Wells, got a sentence they cannot use. Because you don't get to call someone fragile after they survive the 5th longest match of the season and describe themselves as fresh as a flower. The WTA video of her post-match interview gathered more than 153,000 views and over 9,200 reactions on Facebook within the first 2 hours. Her match highlights were watched more than 280,000 times and gathered over 10,000 reactions within the first 3 hours. 153,000 views for a post-match interview after a second-round victory at an event where the reigning world #1 and defending champion is also playing. The gap between Alex Eala's digital footprint and everyone else at this tournament is so enormous that comparing them feels almost unfair. But this is the reality that the WTA is living in right now. And it is the reality that Magda Linette walked directly into when she beat Swiatek that same afternoon. Now let's talk about what Linette actually did, because it was astonishing. And because it is the reason Saturday's match is the most complicated, most dangerous, most fascinating matchup left in the women's draw. Magda Linette, world number 50, 34 years old, a player who had just lost in the first round at Indian Wells 2 weeks ago, walked onto center court at Hard Rock Stadium and beat Iga Swiatek, 6-time Grand Slam champion, reigning Wimbledon champion, the second seed, 1-6, 7-5, 6-3. It was Swiatek's first opening match loss at a WTA Tour event in 74 consecutive tournaments. 74. That is not a streak, that is a dynasty. And Linette, coached by the legendary Agnieszka Radwanska, arguably the greatest Polish women's player of the modern era, just ended it. At the tournament where Swiatek was expecting to meet the girl who humiliated her 12 months ago and finally settle the score.
Well, you can see she's competing against the very best here tonight. Didn't need to go that close to the line there.
Swiatek couldn't convert. She earned just 1 breakpoint total in the second and third sets. "I stopped doing anything well tactically," she said. "It just was a bad match for me in the second and third sets." The second seed eliminated. The marquee rematch canceled. The draw blown open. And then Linette sat in front of the cameras, and she said it. "I'm happy that Filipinos are being exposed to tennis. That is the moment." And now let's talk about exactly why those 8 words are one of the most significant things said at this entire tournament. This is where most people stop. They play the clip, they say, "Wow, that's nice," and they move on. But we are not moving on, because those 8 words contain an entire philosophy, and once you understand what is actually inside them, you cannot unhear it. Magda Linette is 34 years old. She has been a professional tennis player since 2009. She has competed at Australian Opens and Wimbledons and US Opens and Roland Garros. She has seen every kind of crowd, every kind of atmosphere, every kind of storyline that professional tennis has to offer in 17 years on tour. She reached a Grand Slam semi-final. She won 3 WTA titles. She has played in front of partisan crowds in Poland, in front of hostile crowds in America, in front of indifferent crowds at small tournaments in countries where tennis barely registers. And she looked at what Alex Eala has done to the tennis world and said, "I am happy." Not, "She's a good player." Not, "It should be a great match." Not the kind of diplomatic anodyne response that players give when they're trying to say something without saying anything. She said happy. Genuinely, openly, publicly happy. that because of this 20-year-old Filipino girl, an entirely new nation of people is watching the sport that Linette has given 17 years of her life to. She said, "I just had to go for a little bit more. I had to start hitting a little bit faster too to push her a little bit more back, not give her space. But I think it all started with serving a bit better." That was her tactical debrief of beating Swiatek. Precise, professional, no celebration, no drama. And then, when the conversation turned to her next opponent, she left the tactics behind entirely and led with her heart. That contrast is everything. She is cold and clinical about the biggest win of her 2026 season, and she is warm and generous about the 20-year-old she has to beat on Saturday. Because Magda Linette, for all the pressure of this moment, understands something the haters will never understand. Alex Eala is not just her opponent. Alex Eala is the reason this match matters. The reason this center court will be packed. The reason this round of 32 will be broadcast into living rooms in Manila and Dubai and Los Angeles and London and everywhere a Filipino flag has ever been planted. And Linette, who has spent 17 years fighting for relevance in a sport that can be brutally indifferent to players outside the top 10, is grateful for it. Because when you have given everything to a sport and then watched a 20-year-old girl from a country nobody expected suddenly make that sport matter to 115 million new people, the only honest response is, "I am happy." But now let's be brutally honest about what Saturday actually means. Because gratitude is beautiful, and the praise is real, and the moment is everything. But at the end of it, Magda Linette is coming for Alex Eala with everything she has. And she has more than people realize. Their head-to-head stands at 2-1 in Linette's favor. She beat Eala in Abu Dhabi in 2024, 7-6, 6-1. She beat Eala in Nottingham in 2025, 6-4, 6-3. She knows this game. She has sat across the net from Eala and worked out the angles. She has a coach, Agnieszka Radwanska, who can see tactical vulnerabilities that most people watching from the stands would never spot in 100 viewings. She is currently coached by former world number 2 Agnieszka Radwanska, one of the greatest Polish tennis players of all time. And Radwanska built her career on reading opponents, on deconstructing games, on finding the seam between a player's strength and their vulnerability, and exploiting it with surgical precision. She will have spent Thursday evening going through Eala's match against Sigmund, frame by frame. She will have found things. She will have given Linette a plan. Eala reversed the head-to-head in Auckland in January 2026, beating Linette 6-3, 6-2 in the quarterfinals. Convincingly, dominantly, with the kind of scoreline that suggests a player who had fully solved the puzzle. But Miami is not Auckland. Hard Rock Stadium is not New Zealand. And Linette, fresh, rested, riding the momentum of the biggest win of her season, is not the same player who walked onto an Auckland court in January. Eala faces Linette as the higher-seeded, higher-ranked player. She is the favorite on paper. But she also played 3 hours and 20 minutes on Thursday. She also had her gamesmanship buttons pushed by Sigmund. She also carries 390 points of pressure on her shoulders. Because if she exits here, the drop from world number 29 will be significant and immediate. Eala said, "I'm really pleased with how I'm handling everything as a whole. A lot of things have changed for me this year, so I think I'm doing a good job of keeping that balance of being hungry and staying happy and still working hard." Hungry, happy, working hard. 3 words from a player who understands, better than any analyst can explain from the outside, exactly what this balancing act requires. She is not pretending the pressure doesn't exist. She is not performing invincibility. She is saying, "I know what I have to do. I know how to hold the tension between ambition and joy. And I know, with every fiber of a career built from the Rafa Nadal Academy to the top 30 of the world, that I belong here." And then she told Tennis Channel the story that broke the internet.
I was blowing up, my phone was blowing up, and I tried not to look at it a lot. And Rafa sent me a message, but I saw it like 4 days after.
he was buried
Yeah,
in your
so
DMs.
I left him undelivered for 4 days and I almost died. Don't do that, guy, but he was super nice.
She left Rafael Nadal undelivered for 4 days because her phone was so overwhelmed with messages from 115 million Filipinos that a personal message from the greatest clay court player in the history of the sport got buried. And when she eventually saw it, and almost died, as she said, he was nice about it. Because of course he was. Because what do you say to a girl who broke the internet so completely that she accidentally ghosted you? She went on, "It was such a pleasure to share the court with him. He gave me some tips on my forehand and a few other small advices. This is the first time I've ever hit with him in my life, and it's just a memory that will last forever." Forehand tips from Rafael Nadal, after accidentally leaving him undelivered for 4 days. And then she went out and played the longest match of her WTA career and said she was fresh as a flower. This is the girl that Magda Linette praised without being asked. This is the girl that 280,000 people watched a highlight reel of within 3 hours. This is the girl coming for Saturday's center court with the noise of 115 million people behind her back. If Eala wins on Saturday, she faces a potential 4th-round match against 13th seed Karolina Muchova, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist who knocked her out at the US Open last year. The draw has not gotten easier, it has gotten harder. Every round is a former top 10 player, a Grand Slam champion, a veteran who knows the game at a molecular level. But that is the thing about Alexandra Eala that the numbers cannot capture and the head-to-head records cannot measure. She does not care who is on the other side of the net. She did not care that it was Swiatek last year. She did not care that it was Goff at Indian Wells. She wrote, "Deja vu," on the camera after beating Siegemund because coming back to Miami, coming back to this court, coming back to the place where everything changed, that is not pressure for her. That is home. She said it herself. "I came to Miami last year as a wild card. Now I'm in the 3rd round again, so I'm really happy. And especially having been able to compete at this level today against an amazing fighter. Really happy." In the middle of defending 390 points, in the middle of the longest match of her career, in the middle of the gamesmanship and the pressure and the weight of an entire nation's hope, really happy. And Magda Linette, the woman standing in her way, the woman who just slayed a giant, the woman coached by one of the sharpest minds in the history of women's tennis, looked at all of this and said not a single negative word. She said, "I am happy that Filipinos are being exposed to tennis. Saturday, the court fills, the flags go up, the noise starts. And somewhere in that roar, underneath every chant, inside every banner, across every face of every Filipino who stayed up past midnight or bought an expensive seat or flew across the country to be in that stadium, is the same message that Magda Linette delivered without anyone asking her to. She belongs here. We always knew it. And now even the opposition is saying so. Laban, Alex, Saturday is yours." The Eala versus Linette match is happening Saturday on center court at the Miami Open. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that button right now, smash the like, ring the bell. Because every single time Alexandra Eala walks onto a tennis court in 2026, history is made. And Saturday will be no different.